Hello to you club members and welcome back to another video. So, I was kind of at a loss for what to do right now, and I thought I want to watch some dark animated stories, and I thought, why not react to some dark animated stories and get a video out of it? So, that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to react to 3 truly terrifying night shift horror stories. I think that's what I clicked on, and it's by Dark Ace Animations. So, yeah. Here we go. Spooky. Let me know if y'all are also on spring break. I'm on spring break.
The story I'm going to share took place a little over 11 years ago. At the time, I was a nurse at one of our local hospitals and working primarily on the cardiology floor. I was a relatively new employee at the facility, so I was taking pretty much any shift I could get. A lot of my shifts were overnight shifts or shifts that started late afternoon and went through to the middle of the night. At the time, I didn't mind, but looking back on it now, I have no idea how I wasn't in bed by 10 p.m. every night like I am now. There are probably 1,000 experiences I've had throughout my career that would make for an interesting story. But there is one that sticks out more than others and still bothers me to this day. On the cardiac floors, we allowed different visitation rules than some of our other floors. Due to the sometimes unexpected and catastrophic nature of the illnesses, it wouldn't be uncommon to have visitors get approved to stay a majority of the day or night. If a spouse had just experienced a heart attack, it was natural to have someone stay the night even if they had been stabilized and moved to our floor. There was one particular patient who had their spouse with them for 2 to 3 days as they recovered and worked to get discharged and released home. They were both very nice people, especially my patient who still remains one of the sweetest people I'd ever met. Her husband, who was nice enough even from the beginning, seemed to have something a little off. I remember the wide smile that he would have when talking to me or coworkers. At first it seemed kind and inviting, but after holding a few minutes of conversation, it got kind of uncomfortable. Anyway, the first occurrence happened on the second night of the stay. I was working an overnight shift and it was later in the evening. I was at the nurse's station and saw the light flashing outside the patient's room, which notified me that they had used the call button to request something. I made my way to the room and went in to check and see what was going on. When I got there, the lights were off, but the TV was on and the patient looked to be sleeping. I was kind of confused and thought that maybe the patient accidentally hit it in their sleep. Then I heard, "Smells good," right behind my ear. I jumped and kind of shrieked and saw that it was the patient's husband. He said,
wow.
"Oh, it was just me playing a little joke and hiding in the bathroom." He stammered.
That's kind of weird, dude.
"Oh, yeah. Sorry, your hair smells good."
Okay.
I just kind of stood there in silence for a second and replied,
This guy's a creep.
"Please let me know if there's anything else either of you need. Just only use the call bell if you guys actually need assistance, okay?" I left the room and went back to the nurse's station, which sat directly across from a bank of elevators. The location was annoying because the old elevators made a loud noise when they went up or down. A few hours had passed and the elevator was making its oh-so-lovely sound again, and it dinged to open the doors to our floor. I looked around the desk, but no one was there and the doors closed and the elevator went back down. Weird, right? Well, this happened 5 more times in a row, so I finally decided to see who was messing around and calling or sending the elevator. I got into the elevator and it went down to the 2nd floor where the doors opened. Again, no one was there. And being annoyed, tired, and confused at this point, I went back up to my floor to head back to my desk. When I got back up, the elevator had thankfully stopped its constant noise and movement. However, when I reached for my cup of water, I noticed a folded piece of paper. I thought maybe it was something I left in on one of the patient's rooms, or that it was something that I wrote down that I didn't want to forget to do. But when I unfolded it, it said, "For my favorite nurse," with a small drawing of a rose or some type of flower.
This dude is creepy.
I sat it down and looked around to see if there was anyone around. I didn't see anyone outside of another nurse who was all the way at the other end of the hallway coming out of another room. Thankfully, I was able to keep myself busy for most of the night, and it was almost time for me to hand off my patients to the next shift. As I was finishing some paperwork, I felt a feeling like someone was behind me or I was being watched. I sat up in my chair and kind of looked around and saw a head sticking out of the doorway of a patient's room. Yep, it was the smells good person from earlier in the night. As soon as he saw my gaze going that way, he popped his head back into the doorway. I angled my chair so that I could see the room, but it still looked like my head was facing my computer. And every so often, I could see a head popping out of the doorway and then darting back into the room. I tried to ignore it the best I could so I could just finish my shift and go home and get some sleep. I did just that and returned to work the next day to find that the patient from that room had indeed been discharged, and when I was getting my new assignments, one of my colleagues said, "I heard you made a new friend last night."
Not
I
really a
asked what they
friend.
meant, and she said, "Well, one of your patients that got discharged today, one of their family members were looking for you and asking for you. They wanted to see if you were here, and we told them you were gone, and we didn't know when your next shift was. When we told him that you weren't here, his face went from a smile to a frown, and he just walked away. And we figured you just made a good impression or something." I just smiled at my coworker and went back to reviewing some charts. I will say that things always seem a little more unnerving on the night shift, and I've always wondered if that's our subconscious at work, or if weird things really do occur more at night.
That was one story.
I live in Northern Virginia, a town around an hour outside of DC, and because of Corona and quarantine, I've been at home with my parents delivering pizza for a job. So far, it's been pretty lucrative, at least $50 in tips every night. My store is a local one, which makes operations a lot less mechanical and a bit more organic, which serves as both a vice and a virtue. It had been around 3 weeks since I got hired, and I was enjoying my life as the new delivery guy. I love the job. It's one of the best I'd ever had. At the end of the night, perhaps 10 or so minutes before closing, we get an order, of course for a single pizza on the edge of the delivery border. The location looks like an apartment complex way off the main road, and my manager asked me, "Hey, all the drivers are closing. You take that order and just head home, alright?" The order is really simple.
Oh, nice.
Just an extra large pizza with 3 extra cheese options. I put the pizza in the sleeve, hop in my car, and begin playing
So he gets a
Underworld
free
on the
pizza.
speaker, in the mood to drive fast and kick some butt. Now, when most apartment complexes are lit up with street lamps, this one had no functioning light sources, and the roads leading up to it were very serpentine and steep. After navigating the crooked roads, I finally arrive at the apartment complex. Since the elevator isn't turning on, I have to heave myself up these stairs. I get to the door, and a little porch light is switched on, conveniently lighting up the room number. I can distinguish the sound of 2 or 3 children playing around inside. As soon as I knock, the door opens almost instantly. Taken aback, I see a small kid standing in the doorway, probably one of the little dudes playing earlier. I ask him, "Hey, little man, are Mom and Dad home?" He answers, "No, but..."
Oh, maybe
Big
he is
sister
actually
is-
just delivering the pizza.
This kind of put me on edge, as I'm not comfortable having to deal with some little kid and money, but then my attention goes to the kid's clothes. He's wearing pajamas when, while they weren't super tattered or worn out, you could see a streak of this sort of brownish stuff that I took to be chocolate or something.
Oh boy.
The kid keeps staring at me while I'm getting gradually more uncomfortable, and I ask him, "Well, can you go grab Big Sis for me?" He looks at me confused and explains, "No, she's playing hide and seek. I can't find her. Do you want to come inside and help me find her?"
No.
At this moment, I get an actual look at the interior, and I'm just stunned. The room is unbelievably dark, with the walls painted either a dark gray or black, absorbing what little light is produced by this very old block-style TV. You can feel how very cramped this room is, even from outside, and you can smell the awful cigarettes and day-old fish odor wafting out of it. I'm definitely not going inside, so I tell him, Sorry, little buddy, I can't come inside. It'd be rude, and my bosses say I can't." The kid looks back into the apartment and yells to his sister, "Sis, he won't come inside." I noticed that he's got a very concerned look on his face, as if though he just got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Suddenly his face shifts to one of deep intent, almost like he got turned into a trance somehow, and he tells me calmly, "She says it's okay, and that she has your money inside."
Oh no.
Now, I didn't hear anybody here, and it was getting a little bit too disturbing, so I decided it was time to just get away. I nervously say to him, "Listen, I'm just gonna go ahead and leave this here, okay? I gotta head back to work soon, so... yeah, have a good night, kid." He loudly retorts, "No, you can't go yet. Sister hasn't given you the monies." I can tell that he was visibly upset as he runs through the foyer into the living room,
Go get the
almost
money
disappearing
then.
into the darkness. The rancid, fishy cigarette smell from earlier is getting even more intense, and along with the pressure unlike I've ever felt before. I'm getting extremely uncomfortable at this point, and I start kneeling to complete the contactless delivery procedure. As I take the pizza and begin setting it on the ground, I notice a single cockroach emerging from the door.
Ooh.
I get up to stomp on it as I don't want it getting in the pizza box. As I raise my foot, it ceases moving like it had accepted its fate somehow. As my soul comes in contact with the insect, an ear-splitting, inhuman wail reverberates off the walls of the interior, piercing my eardrums.
What?
I remember being overwhelmed by primal fear and hearing the little kid inside saying something like, "Sissy, no, he didn't mean it." I started hearing scuttling from down the hall, and I decided to evacuate. I was kind of surprised at my corporate senses being active still, as I still took a second to put the pizza on the doorstep before bailing out. As I'm bolting down the stairs, I guess I must have stepped on another cockroach because another shriek chased me down the stairs. I faintly hear the kid's voice giggling. "Come back, mister! I have your monies right here!" I enter my car, and I almost stain my seat right there. I'm sweating so badly and shaking more than Michael J. Fox. After a few attempts, I successfully start the car and bolt out of that cursed complex. While driving, I feel nauseous, and I arrive at a 7-Eleven parking lot and hurl outside the window. After simmering down, I drive back home and take a long shower. And that's my only real encounter with the paranormal, I guess, if that really what it was. I can honestly say I never saw anything or had anything touch me, and maybe it was just some kind of elaborate prank from the kids, but I can promise you I will never be delivering within 5 miles of that apartment. And frankly, I might even quit my job. I never want to risk getting sent near there again.
Wow. All because of one apartment.
I got a few work-related stories from my hometown I can post. This first one happened when I was a 20-year-old college student. At the time, I worked in a gas station. It wasn't a building by itself either. Rather, it acted more like a booth that was attached to a supermarket. The booth itself is located a bit off-site on the other side of this huge parking lot, but the supermarket owns it. The booth faces the store, but it has a huge woodland area directly behind it. The door to the booth faces left into the woods, and I know I'm being overly specific, but this is important. So the window in the booth is bulletproof, but only covers the front so you can't see directly to the left or right of the booth. At the time of this experience, I've been working at the station for maybe a few months, when all of a sudden, this nasty storm hit the area one night. The rain was so bad that you could barely see 10 feet in front of you, and it was flooding all over the place. But the supermarket, being desperate for money, refused to close the booth down, so I showed up for my typical 5 to 11 p.m. shift in the pouring rain. 3 hours into my shift, the power goes out due to the storm, which by this point has gotten downright apocalyptic. It's pitch black out there, and the rain is coming down hard, so I decided to sit tight in the booth while I wait for a manager or something to either let me go or to fix the power. Of course, this means the phones are down, so I can't call in the store, and nobody in their right mind is buying gas, so I decided to start doing my booth chores like cleaning the counter, counting cigarettes, tidying the drawer, etc. Now, this next part will require a bit more background information, so bear with me. The booth
Okay.
itself is supposed to be locked at all times, but one of the new hires managed to break the key off inside the lock, making
What?
one of our managers break the lock so we all could get back inside. That lock still hadn't been replaced, but we were told to pretend the door was still locked. The door still had a deadbolt, but I found it annoying to fool with, so I mostly just left it unlocked. Whenever I'd go to open the door, I'd pretend to put the key in and make an audible sound like a lock being opened. Anyway, back to me sitting in the unlocked booth in the pitch-black pouring rain. I'm in the middle of my chores when I hear something outside the booth, like a muffled sort of splashing sound. Again, there's zero visibility, so I press my ear against the door and I can clearly hear someone walking around the booth, in the rain, before stopping in front of the door. Before I can kick myself for not locking it, I hear that sound, followed by the most dreadfully quiet couple of seconds. I'm just waiting to die at the hands of some deranged serial killer or crackhead, when suddenly, the footsteps start splashing back into the woods. I quietly soil myself as I race to lock the deadbolt and I wait out my shift. I would occasionally hear the footsteps outside, but they never tried to open the door. Finally, my manager drives over in a truck to close me out for the night. Since I'm still kind of new here, I didn't want to seem like I was delusional or crazy or that I was a crackhead, so I never mentioned it to him or anyone else at the store. A few months later, this kid I was training told me he'd heard footsteps real late one night during a storm, and thankfully, the lock had been replaced since then. I just tell him it was nothing, but not to open the door if he thinks there is something out there. Not because I didn't want to look delusional, but because I can't explain this phenomenon. Now fast forward a couple of months, and I'm still working at the booth. By this point, I'm the second oldest person working there, so sometimes I'd get calls from younger coworkers when they accidentally mess up. On this particular night I was off, but I still got a call from this high schooler who I'll call Rhea. I look at the time and it's 9:30, so I sigh and pick up the phone, and before I can even get in a what happened, Rhea is in hysterics, saying something about her trainee being missing, and then lots of sobbing. Confused, if not a little agitated that she called me first, I try to get her to call the cops or something if he's been kidnapped, but she insists that she can't call the cops because they wouldn't believe her. So, my next line of thinking is to ask her why she hasn't told a manager, and she cries some more and says that they wouldn't understand. More agitated than confused, I agreed to go out there and calm her down. I get dressed, go out there, and park next to the booth. There were no customers around, and the girl was just standing in the booth, staring at the door. She spots me, opens the door, and starts sobbing, telling me to hurry inside. Eventually, I got her to stop crying long enough to tell me what happened. Apparently, she was training this new guy, Matt, who was an older guy about my age, and she said, the dude felt off, like a robot or something, and kept staring at her all dazed. Several times he would stop talking mid-sentence and ignored her attempts to address it. At this point, she's getting real uncomfortable and is about to call into the store about him when he starts sort of humming, she says. She described it as kind of like as if someone was attempting to imitate a purring cat, like they were breathing heavily and buzzing at the same time. So she reaches for the phone, and he reacts by grabbing her hand and just staring at her. She starts bawling at this point, begging him to stop, and he lets go of her hand, then opens the door, and just sprints off into the woods out of sight. She said he came back a few minutes just before I got there and asked to be let back in, but she refused, so he just ran back into the woods. At this point, I'm either thinking he picked up on the meth phase that the neighborhood was slinging around, or that she's being dramatic. Regardless, the story sounded pretty dangerous, and we needed to call the cops or something at least. I tell her we're going to call the cops, and then we're going to walk outside and wait for them, but she doesn't want to go outside. She says that she can almost feel him waiting out there. Tired, irritated, and not really buying the story, I just say screw it. She can stay in the booth and call the cops while I make sure the tree line is clear. I take this weak little flashlight that I stashed out there after the first story and go outside to start scanning the tree line. I barely begin shining the light around when, suddenly, The hair stands up on the back of my neck as I hear this humming noise. She described it rather well, too, because it sounded kind of like cicadas mixed with breathing. I look inside the booth, and she's curled up in the chair, staring to my left. I didn't even look where she was staring, I just immediately booked it back to get inside. But I left the keys with her, and she's not getting up to let me in. I'm pounding on the door while screaming at her to let me in, and the humming stops abruptly as I hear something behind me and to the left. It's Matt. He's standing just on the edge of the trees. My panic intensifies, and at this point, Rhea finally lets me into the booth, and I immediately deadbolt the thing shut. All of a sudden, Matt is right outside asking to be let back in. He says he's sorry, and that he got a bit nervous back there, and he begins circling the booth while he just repeats the same couple of excuses, asking to come in.
That's not just nervous.
This continues for maybe 5 minutes before the cops arrive, and Matt just begins to run off into the woods again. I end up having to explain to both the cops and our manager what happened, leaving out the weird humming. As far as I know, Matt never showed up, so they fired him and Rhea quit eventually, and that was the end of it. I was never particularly close to Rhea since she was still in high school when I was in college, so we never got to talk about what happened. I have no idea what happened that night, though. Maybe Matt was just some doped-up meth junkie who was capable of making some really weird noises. I'll never know. I guess it could explain why he bolted out of there when the cops began to show up, but that day is still quite a mystery to my mind.
Our official merch store is finally here.
Alright, so that's 3 truly terrifying night shift horror stories from this animation channel. I forgot their name already. But yeah, that's all for now, and goodbye. Also, I'm sorry that I haven't made a video in a while. I had a video planned reacting to something on TV, but it didn't actually show, like, the show. It just screen recorded a still image, so I obviously was not going to post that. Plus, it was super echoey anyway. Sorry if this is echoey, but, like, I don't know how to fix it. So, I don't know, man. And, alright, that's all for now. Oops.